Have you ever heard a story so powerful, so quietly intense, that it stirs something deep within your soul? A story where no cries are needed, only silence and the voice of a child, to shake the hearts of many. In a tranquil European town, nestled among cobbled streets, there stood an old church. Its steeple reached high into the sky, casting solemn shadows across the morning light. Each day the bells tolled, not merely as a call to prayer, but as a symbol of a tradition deeply rooted in faith. Stained glass windows glowed with vivid depictions of saints and angels, and worn wooden pews bore the imprint of generations who had come to worship, filled with certainty and trust. Among these devoted souls, one figure loomed larger than most, Sister Maria. She was not merely a nun, she was the very soul of the church. Tall, composed, unwavering in her convictions, she had dedicated her life to her faith. For Sister Maria, truth was not a mystery. It was found in the sacred text she held dear, in the rituals she had performed since her youth, and in the doctrines she had guarded with fierce loyalty. Very few dared to question her. Some had tried, scholars, seekers, wanderers. They came armed with arguments, debates, philosophies. Yet none had succeeded in unsettling her. Her answers were resolute, her gaze sharper than their cleverest words. Over time, the town came to believe her faith was a fortress, unshakable, impenetrable. But then, one morning, the wind did blow, and it didn't come in the form of an academic or a theologian. It came gently, unexpectedly, in the form of a 10-year-old boy. His name was Daniel. That day began like any other. The great church doors creaked open as sunlight spilled into the sanctuary. A few members of the congregation had already taken their seats. Sister Maria stood near the altar, preparing her notes, her robe crisp, her hands steady. Everything was as it always was, until it wasn't. From the back of the church, footsteps echoed. Light, deliberate, unhurried. Heads turned. A boy entered, accompanied by a man who seemed to be his father. The child's face was calm and clean, his eyes wide with quiet confidence. He didn't appear nervous, nor did he walk with pride. He simply walked as though he belonged. A ripple of whispers moved through the pews. A child? Here? And not just any child, a Muslim child. Sister Maria turned, her eyes locked on the boy. Her lips did not smile. Instead, they tightened slightly. She had seen many visitors walk into this church, but never one like him. Not a child. Not with such quiet resolve. The boy stopped a few steps in. His father lingered respectfully behind. Daniel looked directly at Sister Maria. She stepped forward, arms crossed, voice steady but edged with suspicion. "What can we help you with?" she asked. His father answered first, his voice measured and polite. "We'd like to speak, if that's acceptable." Sister Maria arched a brow. "You're not the first to come seeking dialogue," she said. "Many have tried to challenge us. None have succeeded." Daniel didn't flinch. He met her gaze with a clarity rare even among adults. "I haven't come to challenge anyone," he said softly. "I've only come to say something. Something you might not have heard before." There was no arrogance in his voice, no confrontation, only sincerity. For a moment, Sister Maria said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. The congregation grew still, the whispers fading into silence. "Very well," she said. "Speak." Daniel inhaled deeply. His hands remained steady. His face was still. "I'd like to recite a verse," he said, "from our holy book. Would you be willing to listen?" A long, uneasy silence followed. A few in the congregation shifted in their seats. But before anyone could respond, Sister Maria raised her hand. "Let him speak," she said, her tone calm but unyielding. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Then, as a light filtered through the stained glass, casting hues of red, blue, and gold across his face, he began to recite. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It was calm, steady, and filled with something undeniable: truth. He recited verses from Surah Maryam, the story of Mary, mother of Isa, Jesus. His Arabic words flowed like a gentle stream, smooth and resonant. Though the language was foreign to many, the emotion behind it was unmistakable. There was rhythm, reverence, and a quiet power in every syllable. Sister Maria felt it first. Her eyes widened slightly. This wasn't merely a child reciting scripture. It was as if the words were speaking to the very walls of the church, to the generations buried beneath its floors, to the souls seated in reverent stillness. Her arms dropped slowly to her sides. Her lips parted just slightly. Her lips parted just slightly. A strange shiver moved through her chest, a sensation that confused her. For someone who had spent her life grounded in certainty, that feeling alone was unsettling. Daniel continued. His voice never faltered, and the church, so used to creaking benches and soft murmurs, was silent. Utterly silent. By the time the final verse dissolved into stillness, the room felt changed, transformed. No one moved, and then, quietly, Sister Maria's eyes filled with tears. She stood motionless beneath the cascading light of stained glass, her expression unreadable, but her tears undeniable. No one dared to speak. The very air seemed to hold its breath. The effect of Daniel's words hung like incense, subtle yet inescapable. The congregation, once mildly curious, now sat in stunned awe. Something sacred had brushed against them. They could not name it, but they knew it. Daniel remained still. He did not speak. He did not smile. He only stood, waiting. His presence wasn't demanding. It was offering. Sister Maria finally broke the silence. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked, her voice softer than it had been in years. Daniel smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "My father teaches me," he said, "and I read it from our holy book, the Quran." Her gaze shifted to the man behind him. He stood quietly, humbly, watching everything. "Your son," she said. The man nodded. "Yes, but he belongs to God before he belongs to me." Sister Maria was about to reply when another figure stepped forward from the shadows. A man in his later years with gray in his hair and a look of solemn authority. It was Father Michael, the spiritual overseer of the church, Sister Maria's mentor of over 2 decades. His voice cut through the stillness like cold steel. "Sister," he said sharply, "do not be swayed by the sweet voice of a child. This is no place for confusion." Sister Maria flinched as if struck by icy water. His words pulled at her, trying to anchor her to the certainty she had always known. But something had already shifted. She nodded, slowly, attempting to steady herself. "Of course," she murmured, though her voice had lost its firmness. Daniel turned to Father Michael. There was no fear in his eyes, only clarity. "I didn't come to prove anything," he said gently. "I only came to share what I believe is true." Father Michael folded his arms. "Sharing, or trying to influence." Daniel's voice remained calm. "I don't seek to change anyone, but isn't it fair to listen before judging?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the silence before it. A question no one had ever dared to ask in this church. Sister Maria looked at Daniel. There was something about him, not just in his words, but in the way he carried them. He wasn't afraid of rejection. He wasn't trying to win. He simply offered something deeper. "Continue," she said suddenly. Father Michael turned sharply. "Sister," but she raised her hand. "Let him continue." Daniel nodded with gratitude, not triumph. "Sister," he said, "do you know how the Quran speaks of Mary and Jesus?" Sister Maria straightened. "Of course. Mary is the mother of Jesus, and Jesus is the Son of God." Daniel shook his head gently. "In the Quran, Mary is a woman of great purity," he said, "chosen above all women of her time, and Jesus, he is a prophet of God, born by his will, without a father, but never called the Son of God. He is a servant, a messenger." A subtle unease stirred the room, but Daniel pressed on. He closed his eyes and began to recite again. This time he spoke the translation aloud. He told of Mary's labor, her isolation, her anguish beneath the palm tree, and the miracle that followed. Then he paused. "And when she returned to her people with the child," Daniel said, "they accused her of the worst. But in that moment, the baby Jesus spoke." A gasp rose from one of the pews. Sister Maria's brow furrowed. "The baby spoke?" she asked, not in disbelief, but in awe. Daniel nodded. "Yes. From the cradle, he said, 'I am the servant of God. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet.'" The silence in the church deepened. Not empty, but sacred. Sister Maria stood still, her mind spinning. She had spent her life surrounded by scripture, tradition, and faith. But she had never heard this story, and yet it didn't feel foreign. It felt familiar. It felt like truth knocking on a door she hadn't known existed within her. From the corner of her eye, she saw Father Michael's jaw tighten. "We've heard enough," he said harshly. "There is no room for doctrines that contradict our faith." But this time, Sister Maria did not agree. She turned toward him slowly. "Do we truly know everything, Father?" she asked, her voice quieter, but firmer than it had ever been. His eyes narrowed. "You must not hesitate." But Sister Maria no longer stood in certainty. For the first time in her life, she stood in wonder. Daniel looked at her again. "I am not here to win an argument," he said, "only to share a side of the story few have heard. Not to challenge your faith, only to offer another piece of the truth." She looked at him, her heart caught between all she had ever believed and something entirely new, something tender, unshakable, and sacred. She took a breath, and for the first time in her life she wasn't just hearing, she was listening, with her heart. Some in the church leaned forward, curiosity lighting their eyes. A few were visibly moved, not just by Daniel's words, but by how he spoke them. There was a calm in his tone, void of arrogance, free from pride, and untouched by any trace of persuasion. He didn't speak to impress or dominate. He spoke to share, to reveal. But not everyone was stirred. Father Michael's expression had grown stony. He'd witnessed countless spiritual discussions in his time, and he recognized something dangerous when he saw it. Yet what unsettled him now was not hostility or blasphemy. It was sincerity. For he knew too well, sincerity has the power to melt the hardest walls. "Enough," he said again, this time more forcefully. "This boy has spoken long enough. This is not a platform for Islamic preaching." But Sister Maria didn't acknowledge him. Her gaze never left Daniel. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than ever. "I want to ask you something," she said. Daniel gave a gentle nod. "Please, sister, go ahead." Her eyes remained locked on his. "If what you've said is true, if what I felt during your recitation was real, then why have I never felt anything like it before? Why, after all these years of prayer, study, and devotion, Did I only feel something now? This was not a rhetorical inquiry. It was a cry from the depths of a soul that had built an entire life upon unwavering belief, and now, for the first time, was questioning the long silence of her heart. Daniel didn't rush his answer. He paused, his gaze softening. Then he said gently, "Maybe, because the heart must seek before it can feel. And sometimes, sister, we confuse tradition with truth. We accept what we're told, without ever truly asking, is this all there is?" His voice was not accusatory, not dismissive, just honest. That honesty hit her harder than any theological counterpoint ever had. She looked down, as if hoping the marble floor might offer her footing. Her hands trembled slightly. The congregation watched in breathless silence, some anxious, others awestruck. When Sister Maria spoke again, her voice cracked. "Are you saying, I've believed a lie?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, sister, I'm not calling your belief a lie. I'm saying, maybe you've never been shown the full picture. Perhaps you've only ever seen one side of it." Father Michael stepped forward again, his voice sharp, almost frantic. "This is manipulation," he declared. "He's planting seeds of doubt in you, sister. You must resist." But the words didn't land the way they once might have. They sounded less like truth and more like fear. Sister Maria turned to him, and for the first time, her eyes didn't hold deference. They held questions. "What if it's not manipulation, Father?" she asked softly. "What if it's something more?" Father Michael's face twitched. "This is not like you," he said, trying to regain control. "You're allowing emotions to cloud reason." "There's reason in what he's saying," she replied, turning again toward Daniel. It was then that Daniel's father stepped forward. His voice was calm, respectful. "None of us came here to cause disruption," he said. "We came because we believed that someone here, just one soul, might be ready to listen, ready to find something they never knew they were missing." Tension hung in the room like a held breath. Then Sister Maria said what no one expected. "What should I do?" It was as if the church itself exhaled. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't react triumphantly. He simply answered as someone who had been taught by truth, not pride. "Ask God," he said, "in your own way, in your own words. Ask Him sincerely. If something I shared touched your heart, don't ignore it. Follow it. Ask for guidance, and He will give it. Not because I say so, but because He promised He would." Tears welled in her eyes again, but these weren't tears of confusion. They were tears of release, of something deeply locked away finally breaking free. She brought her hands to her face and wept. Not out of guilt or shame, but out of the unbearable weight of never having asked these questions before. Gasps rippled through the pews. A few people stood, shocked. Whispered protests rose in pockets. A woman muttered, "Blasphemy in our church." A man bowed his head, visibly shaken. A young priest in the back covered his face with both hands. But the moment did not belong to them. It belonged to... There was silence again. Not doubtful, just stunned. Daniel continued. "In our tradition, Jesus is not divine. He is not the Son of God. He is a prophet, a messenger. He healed the sick, raised the dead, with God's permission, and he always pointed people to worship the one who sent him." Sister Maria looked down, fingers tightening in her lap. Her mind was a storm of verses, doctrines, childhood teachings, and now a boy's voice stirring a part of her soul long untouched. Father Michael stepped forward again. "Sister, he said sternly. "These are just stories. Retellings from another religion. You know the truth. Don't forget who you are." She turned to him. "I know who I've been," she said, "but I'm no longer sure who I am." Father Michael's voice sharpened. "This is confusion." "No," said Daniel's father gently. "This is awakening." "You speak of prophets and scriptures," Father Michael snapped. "But what of the crucifixion? The resurrection? Your book denies it all." Daniel didn't argue. "We believe Jesus was not crucified," he said calmly. "It was made to appear so. God raised him. He will return, not as a son, but as a servant of the same God Mary worshipped." Sister Maria's voice was barely a whisper now. "Why have I never heard this before?" "Maybe," Daniel said, "because no one thought you were ready. But God did." Behind them, murmurs rose again. "Sister Maria," a woman in her 50s called out, "this is dangerous. We came here to worship, not to be confused." "Is it dangerous?" Sister Maria asked, her voice steady. "To listen." The woman turned away. "It's not just listening," Father Michael said. "It's changing. It's doubting truth." Daniel looked at him. "Is truth so fragile that it fears being questioned?" That question echoed in the room louder than any shout. Sister Maria stood. She looked at the cross, then at Daniel. "I don't know what happens next," she said, "but I know this. I cannot unhear what I've heard." Daniel nodded. "And you don't need to decide today." She placed a hand on her chest. "But something in me already has." Turning to the congregation, she said, "I've spent my life teaching. Perhaps now I must allow myself to be taught." Some left. Some sat in stunned silence, but a few leaned forward, for the first time, ready to listen. The church doors creaked as a breeze swept through. No one noticed. All eyes remained at the front, on Sister Maria, the boy, and the space between what had always been and what was now possible. In a place rarely touched by questions and bound tightly by tradition, Father Michael's patience had thinned to a final thread. With a stern step forward, his voice rose, sharper than before. "That's enough," he said forcefully. "This church is not a platform for foreign teachings. Sister Maria, I insist, this ends now." But she didn't look at him. Instead, her gaze turned to the faces of those she had led for decades, people who had trusted her voice, her teachings, her silence. "Haven't I always asked you to think?" She spoke softly to them. "To reflect? Haven't I told you that God speaks to those who seek Him?" She paused. "Then why must we fear hearing a voice we haven't yet known?" No one replied, not because they lacked words, but because something louder than thought had begun to stir in them. The heart. Daniel's father, silent until now, finally spoke again. His tone was calm but unwavering. "Truth, Father Michael, is not a sword. It does not cut. It illuminates. It reveals. What one does with that light is a choice." Father Michael turned to him, agitation in his eyes. "And if that light blinds?" Daniel answered before his father could, his voice steady, without pride. "Then, maybe, we were never really seen clearly to begin with." There was no defiance in his words, only conviction. Sister Maria looked back at Daniel, her face caught between fear and freedom. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Daniel offered a gentle smile. "That's the first step." She looked at him, really looked, and in that moment she didn't just see a boy. She saw a mirror, a reflection of something long buried, the feeling of not knowing, of searching, of being uncertain. She had been the answer for so long. She had forgotten how to be the question. "I want to pray," she said, almost to herself. Daniel nodded. Then pray. Father Michael tried once more, his voice tight with urgency. If you go down this path, there may be no way back. She met his eyes, but her voice no longer trembled. Then let it be, she said, because if there's no way back, perhaps I'm finally facing the right direction. And with that, she bowed her head, not in defeat, not to collapse, but to ask. She prayed, not from a script, not from memory, but from the trembling depths of a heart that had finally admitted it did not know all the answers. And for the first time in that vast church of stone and silence, the walls did not echo scripture. They echoed sincerity. That church had heard countless prayers, weddin,